Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Varsity Views Inside the Huddle Edition, brought to you by Keon Sports. I'm your host, Jax Gregory, and sadly, my other host, Darian Jackson, can't make it today. He's having some troubles with his vehicle, so it's just me today. But with all that being said, let's head into our Week 5 Top 5 Games of the Week. Coming in at number 5 on our countdown is Bay Village versus Westlake. Now this game, first quarter, nothing was happening. Both defenses were battling. It was a very even game. I mean, you could tell both these teams really wanted this one. And at the end of the first, 0-0, nothing going on. But in the second quarter, that would all change. Bay Village would end up scoring 3 times in the second quarter to have 21, while Westlake would end up getting their very own touchdown. Bay Village led at half 21-7 with a pretty comfortable lead and feeling pretty confident about themselves. Now, going into the third quarter, again, mirrored almost the first quarter again, as there was no score. The score stayed 21-7 going into the fourth quarter. But on the first play in the fourth quarter, Westlake would end up scoring a touchdown and be down 21-14. It seemed like Westlake was getting some momentum off that touchdown, but the Rockets would respond with their very own touchdown. They would lead 28-14 in the fourth quarter. Westlake would end up scoring one more time, but that would be the final time they would score, and Bay Village would come out on top 28-21 in a win over Westlake. The player of the game in this one was Bay Village running back Brendan Spellman, who had 2 touchdowns to help the Rockets beat the Demons. If you'd like to read more about this game, please go to keonsports.com and look for Vince McKee's article about this game. He did a great job. Shout out Vince. And now heading into our game number 4 of the week, this one was a shootout. Gunslinging, it was wild. Roosevelt versus Copley. Now, at the end of the first quarter, Copley had a lead, 15-13. So both teams, pretty good offensive games. Defenses weren't really showing up. And that would continue as Copley would get to 29 by halftime and Roosevelt would get to 26. So pretty big second quarter from both teams. Both scored twice. Copley would miss an extra point. 29-26 at half. Now, right out of the gate, right out of halftime, Roosevelt would get a pick 6 to take the lead right back from Copley. This seemed as it was going to be a huge momentum boost for Roosevelt. But, Copley just kept responding. At the end of the third quarter, Copley would lead 43-40 in the third quarter. Not the final score of the game. This is just through 3 quarters. These offenses were so fun to watch, with the quarterbacks going back and forth. And in the fourth, we ended up being tied with 3 minutes left. But that wouldn't last long, as Roosevelt would be able to squeak out some more points and take the lead 59-50, and that would be the final score, Roosevelt defeating Copley. Player of the game for Roosevelt was Michael Bonanno with 45 yards and 2 touchdowns. Copley had a great showing from their quarterback as well, DeJuan Owens. We talked about him in the first episode, I'm pretty sure. But he had 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. So great effort from both teams. Great game. Love to see shootouts like this. It's sad that one of these teams had to lose because they both played their hearts out offensively. But if you'd like to know more about this game, please visit keonsports.com and look for the author Trinity Longwood. She wrote a great article on this game. It's very exciting. Just reading it makes you feel like you were at the game in that atmosphere, watching all these touchdowns be scored. And coming in at number 3 game of the week, we have Elyria Catholic versus Rocky River. This one, again, coming down to the wire. These teams were battling. Not a big scoring quarter to start out the game in the first. Rocky River led 6-0 at the end of the first quarter. And we saw a little more scoring in the second as Rocky River would take a 14-7 lead over Elyria Catholic going into halftime. Elyria Catholic, though, coming out of halftime, their coach, he must have given them a nice little talk because they would score 2 touchdowns coming out of halftime, and Rocky River would have none heading into the fourth quarter. Elyria Catholic led 20-14 at the end of the third. In that fourth quarter, though, Rocky River would find Pater as they took a 1-point lead after scoring a touchdown. Rocky River led 21-20 with limited time remaining. Elyria Catholic would have the ball, and they would dink and dunk their way down the field, run it down the field, and with 55 seconds left, they would go for a game-winning field goal. And that field goal would be good. Elyria Catholic took the lead 23-21 under a minute left to play. Now, Rocky River, they got the ball back, but they couldn't get anything going down the field. They couldn't get their offense couldn't move. Elyria Catholic would hold on and win this one by a score of 23-21. The player of the game was Elyria Catholic running back Levi Ellis, who had 19 rushes for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was huge for them in this game and a key to victory over Rocky River. And as usual, if you'd like to learn more about this game, please go to KeonSports.com and look up the author Chris Grunow. He has a great article about this game. You really feel the game-winning kick atmosphere and all that, so go read it for me. And coming in at the number 2 game of the week was Midview versus Amherst. Now sadly, my co-host Darian, he couldn't be here once again, but he was the one who wrote the article for this game, so be sure to go to KeonSports.com and look up Darian Jackson and read his article. Now let's get into the game. So start right off the game. Midview, their first drive, they go 97 yards and score a touchdown to take the lead 7-0 over Amherst. But Amherst wasn't backing down. On their very first drive, they would go all the way down and score a touchdown of their own. Both teams would score one more time before half, and it would be 14-14 heading into halftime. Now coming out of halftime, Amherst will respond. They would score a touchdown in the third quarter, and heading into the fourth, they led 21-14 over Midview. But it didn't take time for Midview to respond. With 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Midview would score and tie it 21-21. I mean, these teams, a team would score, the other team would score. A team would get a stop, they would get a stop. It was just back and forth. And this would continue, as on Amherst's next drive, they would fumble. Midview recovered it, but less than a minute later, they would have their very own fumble on their drive, and Amherst recovered it. This streak would end though as Amherst wouldn't be able to score, and Midview would get the ball back for a game-winning drive. Midview would go down the field and score a touchdown with only 9 seconds remaining to take the lead 28-21. Amherst couldn't capitalize on a miracle play, and Midview would win this one by a final score of 28-21 in a back-and-forth brawl. Player of the game was Midview QB Mark Reed, who went 8 for 15 for 127 yards and a couple touchdowns, and he also ran for 89 yards. But once again, if you'd like to learn more about this game, go to KeonSports.com and help out my guy Darian Jackson by looking at his article. He deserves it after everything he's been going through lately. And finally, what everybody's been waiting for, the number 1 game of the week. We have Stow versus Brecksville. Both of these teams were starving for a win. Stow at 1-3, Brecksville at 0-4. I mean, they were desperate to win these games. Stow would lead the game 15-3 at the end of the first quarter, though. Offense looking good. Brecksville kind of doing what they've been doing all year, not really scoring. And that wouldn't last, though. Going into the second quarter, we had a back and forth scoring. I mean, Brecksville put up 28 points in the second, and Stow put up 13. So at halftime, we had a tied ball game, 28-28. But coming out of halftime, Stow would end up switching QBs, and it seemed like it was going to pay off as more scoring continued. Brecksville put up 7 points in the third quarter, but Stow's offense would keep scoring with the backup. I mean, they scored 2 times in the third quarter to take a lead 42-35 at the end of the third. Brecksville's got to be thinking to themselves, no, we can't lose to the backup quarterback. Come on now, come on. We need this win. If we're going to win a game, we need this one. And Brecksville's dreams came true. Stow couldn't move the ball in the fourth quarter. Brecksville would end up scoring a touchdown with 4 minutes left to take the lead 43-42 after a made 2-point conversion. All the Bees needed was one stop at home, and it was 4th and 35 for Stow. Brecksville's student section watched in awe, hoping for their first win. And on 4th and 35, Stow got 34.5 yards, but came up a half yard short of the first down, and Brecksville would win the game 43-42. For their first win of the season over a rival, the Stow Bulldogs. You could see the heartbreak in the Bulldogs' hearts as they just walked off the field head down as they were that close, a half yard short on converting a 4th and 35 that would have put them in great position to win this game. The player of the game for Brecksville was wide receiver Logan Doscoso, who had 12 catches for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was huge for this Bees offense today. And Stow, they got some help from Sal Romato, who had 10 touches for 207 yards and 3 touchdowns, but they still came up just short. Shout out Sal, you did great. But Logan, congratulations, you won your team's first game. For more on this wild finish, you can go to KeonSports.com and look for the author Ty Kohler. That'll wrap up our top 5 games of the week, and now we're going to head into Player of the Week. And Stow's Sal Romato, he was up for it. Brecksville's wide receiver Logan Dascoso, he was up for it. Willoughby South running back Tyrone Singleton, who had 13 carries, 217 yards, and 5 touchdowns, he was up for it. It was so close. Danny Stoddard, he had himself a great game as well, but he didn't get it this week. It was North Olmsted's Jared Kelly, who had 6 rushes for 128 yards, 4 catches for 105 yards, a 73-yard punt return touchdown, and he had 5 total touchdowns. This kid was everywhere for North Olmsted. So congratulations on getting our Player of the Week. And now a preview to Week 6 on what games we think are must-watches. Our first game, North Ridgeville at Avon. Both teams 4-1. Both are great on both sides of the ball. This is going to be a great matchup, and I'm predicting that we'll be talking about this exact game right here next week. The next game to look out for is 3-2 North Olmsted at 3-2 Westlake. Westlake coming off a tough loss against Bay Village, and North Olmsted coming off a great game. I'm looking to see how these teams respond to either their downs or their ups. The next game to look out for is 4-1 Normandy at 3-2 Valley Forge. Don't know too much about either of these teams, but from what I hear, this is going to be a showdown. I mean, both teams will be firing back and forth. I'm looking forward to see what happens. Another game to look out for next week is 4-1 Chardon at 4-1 Kenston. Another battle of the 4-1s. Kenston's offense, we know from a week ago, they got some hitters on that offense. I mean, they can go off for so many yards in a game. And Chardon, they're always pretty good. So this is going to be a great game. Be sure to tune into this one. And finally, we have 4-1 Firelands at Keystone, who is 2-3. I want to see if Firelands can keep this winning going. I mean, they've been steamrolling teams lately, but this could be a trap game for them. So I'm saying watch out for Firelands on upset against Keystone. But that's going to wrap up our preview to Week 6. But that's all the time I have for today. This has been Varsity Views Inside the Huddle edition, brought to you by Keon Sports. I've been your host, Jax Gregory. Sadly, again, my co-host, Darian Jackson, wasn't here. Hopefully he'll be here next week. You can find more on Facebook at Varsity Views. It'll be a page. And then you can go on Instagram and follow us at varsity_views. We'll see you next week. And who knows, maybe your team will be on the top 5 list.